Welcome to the Connected Instructor podcast. Today, we have Steven Yellin joining us to discuss his groundbreaking fluid motion factor program. Steven has spent over 4 decades developing this unique approach to sports psychology, which has helped top golfers and athletes across multiple sports access their peak performance states more consistently. He began on the tennis court, but his insights have revolutionized how we think about the mental side of golf. His fluid motion factor program focuses on creating the ideal mental condition for fluid movement and something that every single golfer strives for. We'll be exploring how Steven's techniques can help golfers of all levels quiet their mind, trust their swings, and play with more freedom and consistency. Whether you're a teaching pro looking for new ways to help your students or a player seeking to unlock your true potential, you won't want to miss Steven's fascinating insights into the interaction of mind and motion in golf. Steven, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to dive into this fluid motion factor and truly share one of the life-changing experiences that I had as a professional golfer. So just for a little background for everybody, how I know Steven, I was playing professional golf, not having a whole lot of success, always feeling like I was a sports car stuck in second gear and never able to access what it is that I had. Like I would do it in practice, I would do it, I would see it, and then tournaments would come and I would collapse, I would fail. And I was always blaming my swing for it. I was always blaming there's something technically wrong with what I have going on. But through my time with Steven, he helped show me that the paradigms in my head about the way I thought about motion were just completely wrong. So Steven, thank you so much for being here with us today. You want to give the people a little bit of your background? It's a very, very interesting story about how you kind of came to the idea of the fluid motion.
Sure. It's great to talk to you again, Landon. It brings back some very fond memories of working with you. So I grew up in Florida, and I played tennis as a junior athlete, not golf. And I had a good career in junior golf in Florida. I was the high school state champion, number one ranked junior player. Went on to have a good career playing number one singles at University of Pennsylvania. But when I was a senior at Penn, I had a 1-hour experience that really changed my life. I was in the middle of the food chain of national junior and national collegiate tennis. I'd go to the nationals every year, win a couple rounds, but never really got much farther past the third round. But in a challenge match at Penn, when I was a senior, I sank into a place that I had never experienced before. And I realized that this is what the top junior and collegiate tennis players, and actually all athletes, feel when they play their best. It was just a very, very deep zone experience. And I knew my life was going to change after that because sports was such an integral part of my life. I spent the next 40 years developing a program to set up by design what most athletes, including golfers, obviously experience just by chance when they play their best.
Oh, absolutely. I think, as athletes, if you played sports at any level, you've had some sort of inclination or hint of this zone situation. I'll never forget when I was in like the third grade, I was playing third base in baseball. I remember this guy hit this ball, and I'll never forget, like, it seemed like it took 6 days for that ball to get to me when I laid out and caught it. But I've always found it interesting that you took this zone experience and really got so curious about it that you made it your life's work. So what like how did you kind of first start your that 4-decade long journey to creating this program?
Well, I had to understand the dynamics that took place on the tennis court that precipitated and allowed me to have that experience. And the dynamics were very subtle. And I came up with a conclusion that actually is quite revolutionary in the understanding of motion because my motion went to another level. Now, motion is motion, whether you're returning a serve, you're hitting a driver, you're trying to sink a three throw, you're a pitcher, you're trying to score a goal in soccer. And what I discovered, which is very, very interesting, is that the quality of space before you initiate a motion will more or less determine the quality of the motion. This is very, very revolutionary. It's something that unless you've had that experience and you understand the dynamics between the mind and the body, it's going to be difficult to get your head around. So once I understood those dynamics, that the quality of space before you initiate a motion will determine the quality of the motion, I started to develop a systematic program to experience that space on a different level. Fortunately, about 15 years ago, maybe a little longer now, I hooked up with a neurophysiologist who worked with two Olympic teams, two winter teams, Norway and Denmark. And I spent the summers and spending some time with him, and we would go over and try to answer one question. Of course, he didn't try to answer the question. He answered the question because he's a neurophysiologist. And that is, how is fluid motion produced in the brain physiology? What are the dynamics that produce fluid motion, and why does it break down? Because if you understand those dynamics, which are very subtle, but are very clear and actually very simple, then if you develop a program that mirrors that, then you have a very powerful program. So I would spend the winters massaging my program at Ledbetter Academy, where we met, and constantly refining this program. Because as it turns out, by the time you start the motion, it's too late, any motion. The ship has left the port. And if the quality of that space before you initiated the motion is out of balance, and I can explain out of balance in a second, then that balance, out of balance, is going to show up in the motion. So everyone is really concerned about the motion, which they should be, especially if you're a beginning or intermediate golfer or athlete. But they have to understand that once the ship has left the port, you can't go in there and consistently be doing crisis management to correct the motion.
Oh, absolutely. And I see that constantly. I'm an assistant coach for a high school this year, and I really like seeing this thing where people, they walk into the shot with no plan. They're thinking about things. They're talking as they're walking in there. They have not accessed the zone. They haven't done the nines. They're not walking into the shot nice and free. And the shot is poor. And then after the round, they're like, Coach, I need to work on my takeaway. I need to work on my backswing. I need to work on this. And it's like, no. You never did a good job of setting the algorithm for your brain to actually have any possibility of doing anything. But I think what you said is so, like, the crux of your program, at least from my perspective of it, is the quality of the space determines the quality of the motion. Because it shifts like the paradigm of you looking at it from looking at just the motion, but understanding what caused the motion. So my question for you is, when you first start out with a client, you get someone who comes in and sees you, what is the first thing that you're trying to get into their head to really start to open up their eyes that there is a different way of looking at, like, improving our quality of motion, not just through time on the range, but that we need to improve the quality of space? Like, how do you start to broach that conversation with your?
Well, the program consists of two parts, and again, I teach the same regardless of the level of the player. So the first part is just giving them an overview of how fluid motion is produced, so they understand that there are identical dynamics occurring when you hit a good shot, and there are pretty much identical unfortunate dynamics occurring when you don't hit a good shot. But what I've learned over the years is that the best way to convince somebody of anything is to give them the experience. And in the beginning, I'm not trying to convince them of the experience because, it's like going to a restaurant. Someone gives you a menu, you look at the menu, but you never taste the food. So what difference does it make how delicious, that looks on the menu? You actually have to taste the food. So the first experience I want to give them is, and it's, as you know, it's set up quite easily, is to give them the experience of what fluid motion, what it feels like. What it feels like setting up in a systematic way what they normally experience by chance. Now, once you give them that experience, and of course it's done, as you know, Landon, in a very, very simple way, they start listening to everything that you have to say. You know what? You don't have to convince them of anything. And I am never, ever trying to convince somebody of something. You can't. They have to convince themselves. they have to taste what's on the menu. Otherwise, it's very hypothetical. But once they do that, and once they realize how simple it is for them to hit a fluid golf shot, it's like a divine revelation. Why have I made this so complicated? Because when they played their best, it always felt simple. And what they're trying to do to repeat that is they're making it very complex to try to do something that feels simple. Well, you're never going to get simplicity from complexity. You're only going to get simplicity from real simplicity.
Oh, absolutely. And Steven's new book is called Simplicity, which is it's a great, great book. The first book is The Fluid Motion Factor. Highly suggest that you get these books if you don't have the chance of meeting Steven in person. Get these books and read them, and hopefully this conversation is a good foray into kind of a little appetizer on the menu for you to be able to understand kind of what it is that we're kind of talking about here. I'll never forget like when I first got the taste of that medicine, like it was just like so freeing. And I'll never forget like the first tournament after we worked together. I walked up on the first tee and I like started crying because I was so free of all the burdens that I was kind of holding
Wow.
before like hitting each shot. Yeah, no, it was just like I could finally put it into third gear, that sports car. And I was like, oh my goodness, I just never even knew that this was possible. So like you really do, by doing this program and by helping people understand it and experience it themselves, you really do kind of change people's lives, at least in terms of golf, which for professional golfers is a lot of their life for sure. So what you said you're never going to be able to get complexity from simplicity. So what are kind of some of the simple components of getting the brain prepared to produce fluid motion?
Well, you're never going to get simplicity from complexity. It's not like, it's just
Yeah.
a little bit of the opposite. So
Yeah, that's what I meant.
I know, we know. So you have to understand, the question that needs to be asked is, what is the environment the brain physiology needs to exist in order to produce fluid motion? It's probably the most fundamental question that you can ask. And that environment can really be summarized in one word, and that word is wholeness. The brain physiology was designed to create fluid motion when it experiences wholeness. Now, wholeness is a very abstract term, so let's make it concrete. So you're on the course and you're setting up your shot. And you're taking into consideration all the elements of the shot: the wind, the lie, the temperature, where you are on the round, what you want to hit, how you want to hit it, how you want to shape it. And I think everyone has made a smoothie. When they make a smoothie, what do? They put in a raspberry, strawberry, banana, yogurt, then they hit the blend button. Now, after you hit the blend button, if you could see the outline of the banana, let's say, you don't really have a smoothie. So we're going to make a golf smoothie. We're going to put all those elements into a blender: the lie, the wind, the temperature, where you are on the round, how you want to hit it. Fine. You want to throw in a few swing thoughts? Go right ahead. Whatever you're comfortable with. Now, right before you pull that trigger, just immediately preceding initiating the motion, you hit that blend button. And then what happens at times, unfortunately too many times, is you don't make a golf smoothie. You have something pulsating. Don't hit it left. Don't hit it right. Get the club in this position. Light it like this. Okay. And what happens is that you don't have a threshold level of wholeness before you initiated the motion, because something is pulsating. You can see a chunk of that banana. And then you initiate the motion. Well, if you don't have a threshold level of wholeness before you initiate the motion, and you initiate the motion, chances are you're not going to have a threshold level of wholeness during the motion. So then what happens is the flow of intelligence between the mind and the body is challenged. It's curtailed. It's like you have a garden hose and you pinch it and the water doesn't come out the other end. So then what happens? You go into crisis management. And then you think, geez, what did I do in that swing? You know what? I took it too far on the inside. I took it too far on the outside. The transition was too quick. I had it I laid it back. The angle of attack was off. It was closed in. So what you're doing is you're looking at the byproduct of the problem and not the problem. Because if you don't have a sufficient flow of intelligence, which is a result of not having a threshold level of wholeness during the swing, obviously something physically is going to happen during the swing that's not appropriate. The mistake is to go to the byproduct and not understand the source. The source is before you initiated the motion, you did not have a threshold level of wholeness. So you're not going to have a sufficient flow of intelligence between the mind and the body. And then what happens is you spend 40 years in swing prison working on byproducts and not understanding the fundamental root of the problem.
I think that was phenomenal right there. I'm just going to clip that. I'm just going to play that on repeat because you're absolutely right. Like if you don't maintain wholeness, if you don't turn that blender and let everything go on, you just got a fruit salad. You don't have a smoothie. You don't have that beautiful flow of intelligence kind of from your brain to your body, no interference. I think truly like understanding kind of what we talked about previously, the quality of the space determines the quality of the motion. So therefore, if you don't understand kind of how wholeness is essentially the quality of the space, then the quality of the motion is wrong. And sure, you may be right, like with your brain isn't able to produce fluid motion and you do get steep or you do get over the top or the divot is too big or you hit it off the hosel. All of those things are true. If you go and try to address those, you get stuck in swing prison. And that swing prison is really a terrible place to be because every single time that you hit a bad shot, oh, I'm going to try something new on the next one. Oh, I'm going to try something new. This didn't work. I'm going to try to fix it. And then you're always doubting yourself. So then you're never able to like truly live up to your potential. And honestly, the worst thing that could happen would be you hit it good when you do something new, because then it trains your brain to be like, oh, I can just do this again. But it only happened because it was a novel kind of concept. And one of the things that I thought was interesting when we worked together was you asked me a question, when is your swing going to be good enough? And I didn't have an answer for you because I had never even considered that being a possibility. The only possibility that I thought of was, oh no, my swing has to be perfect. It has to be Tiger Woods level of repeatability. But that was, coming from somebody who didn't have the knowledge and the understanding of how he's able to create that motion. So, when you see people who come to you who are very talented players, I mean, you've worked with PGA Tour, LPGA Tour, senior tour players, college players. Think they've won almost over $80 million playing competitively, kind of working with you. How are you able to, with those players, really get them to get out of that swing present mentality that is so prevalent in golf instruction? Because if you do go to a golf instructor, I want to get better at golf, I go to a golf instructor. Golf instructor is hired to tell you what you do wrong. You grip it wrong, you take it back wrong, you do this wrong, you do that wrong. And they always get stuck in this lacking mentality. Oh, my swing is never going to be good enough. So how are you able to help kind of break people through that mold? Is it the same thing? They just have to experience it?
Yeah, it's knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge is a very powerful tool. And this neuro scientist I work with, Dr. Fred Travis, when he told me that once you've proved a motion, any motion, that motion can't break down. What breaks down is the ability to access what you already own. That really turned my world upside down 15, 20 years ago. So this knowledge is not out there at all on any tour, except for the few players that have gone through my program. But when you realize that this is not a sports psychology or a philosophical or an individual statement, this is a neurophysiological phenomenon that once your motion is grooved, that motion cannot break down. That should change your whole understanding of your sport. And those players who were awake enough and wise enough to realize that made the most use of it. Now, every single golfer, I mean, they're playing the I think they're playing the Solheim Cup this week,
Mhm.
that every single LPGA player, they're over the ball, and they're trying to reproduce a good swing, which on one level makes a lot of sense, because if you don't reproduce a good swing, the ball's not going to go where you want it to go, and that will result in a poor score. But if they understood that the money is in the bank, okay, and once the money is in the bank, it doesn't go anywhere. All you have to learn is how to access what you already own. You're going to be in good shape. And the interesting thing is accessing what you already own, accessing your best swings, as you have already personally attested to, is ridiculously simple. It's so ridiculously simple that it's almost mind boggling, because all golfers literally have been living in such a complex, list generated swing prison world where they feel they have to do X, Y, and Z during a swing in order to sink a swing. That is completely fallacious. That is completely wrong. And every golfer has experienced this, the second ball syndrome. Practice round, they miss a shot. They drop a ball in disgust, and they knock it 2 or 3 feet from the pin. Did all of a sudden they discovered some magic thing about their swing? No, I tell you what they did. They did less. They did less until it felt like they did nothing. And that's the space you want to live in. I'm doing less and less until it feels like I'm doing nothing. But guess what? They're living in a world where if I do more and more, I'm going to hit the ball better. And that's why most golfers don't reach their potential in the game.
It's like that scene from Forgetting Sarah Marshall where he's trying to teach the guy how to surf, and he's like, do less, do less. No, you got to do something, do more, do less.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
but like nobody, like it's very hard to believe that, especially if you are, somebody who's a high school player or a college player, and you're working really hard to continue to try to put money in the bank to groove that motion. So it's like, like when you say grooved motion, I know there's different psychologists or different scientists who will say, 10,000 hours, 10,000 repetitions, whatever. But do you buy into that, like that kind of 10,000 hour
No,
turns into a grooved motion? No, you don't.
no, not even close. Okay.
Interesting.
You have to understand. You have to understand the mind body connection. Okay. And if you don't understand the mind body connection, then the whole 10,000 hour, that whole book and everything, which I actually read, was kind of interesting. Then it makes sense if you don't understand it. But if you understand the mind body connection from a very profound, significant, and fundamental level, then you're in a different reality. And the mind body connection is this: the mind is like an ocean, it's got surface active levels, very analytical levels, choppy waves and active waves, but the mind has the ability to experience deeper levels of its own nature, quieter, softer, more powerful. And the body has the same scheme. The body has the gross, bulkier core level of the muscles of the body, which are important, but if they dominate, you're not going anywhere. And then the fascinating thing is the body has deeper levels of intelligence. For instance, the ability to fire the fast twitch muscles, to smooth out emotion, and to self-correct emotion. Now, here's the interesting thing. It's really interesting. As I'm thinking about this, I'm finding it even more interesting, is that if you're taking a lesson from a golf instructor, you're learning emotion, and you're learning that motion from a surface level of the mind, which means the mind is very active, it's very analytical, which means there's a restricted flow of intelligence between the mind and the body, then the learning curve is very slow, because the mind is not operating the way it should be. It was designed to operate, to create fluid motion and also to create a grooved motion. But if an instructor is able to give instruction where the deeper level of the mind is accessed, which means the more intelligent levels of the body are accessed, then you cut the learning curve by 100, okay? Because what's happening is you're using a machine from a much more powerful level. So, for instance, if someone's taking the club too far on the inside and you want them to take the club more on the outside or straight back, and you tell that person, Betty, you're just whipping that club on the inside. And she's taking that on a very surface level. So she's very focused and very concentrated and very determined to take that club straight back rather than whipping it on the inside. It's like using a machine where you're only using 10 or 15% of the potential of that machine. But if you're able to set up an environment of wholeness, which means that the mind is operating from a deeper level and the body is operating from a deeper level, then not only is she going to be able to complete your instructions or do exactly what you want her to do, but she's going to start doing it more naturally because the body is going to start to default to more powerful positions. So when that happens, when you're giving instruction where the mind is accessed from a deeper level, which means the body is accessing a deeper level, then the deposit in the basal ganglia, which stores muscle memory, the deposit is much more significant, which means the learning curve is increased exponentially. And these 10,000 hours essentially is a waste of life.
And so when you say for a golf instructor, because I have some lessons later today, I'm excited to help people access the deeper levels of their mind. So if you're a golf instructor or a tennis instructor or any sort of instructor trying to coach emotion, and you are trying to make sure that your players are able to access the deeper levels of the mind and the body to be able to groove emotion just slightly differently than they have been doing.
Correct.
Would you recommend using a lot of say, okay, swing under this stick or swing over this stick, or just using your proprioceptive abilities to move the motion? Or how would you kind of recommend a golf instructor do that?
I will give you a very specific way
Beautiful.
because I'm a very generous man.
You are a very generous man, Steven.
So the first thing you have to do is you have to give them an example, experiential example of what wholeness is. They have to experience wholeness. And they can experience wholeness, about setting one, meaning you're over the ball. Right before you pull the trigger, if you dropped the club and stood up, you'd feel more or less the same. So they have to have that experience first. If they don't have that experience first, it's not going to work, what I'm going to tell you, okay? But, you've been through the videos, you've been through the program. You can give them that experience, okay? Now, once they have that experience, which is absolutely crucial and essential, now we're going to go in there and we're going to do a little surgery here, okay? And let's say the surgery is, give me an example of a swing, part of a swing you want to change. What would be a very specific example?
Yeah, a lot of times I see people in the first part of the takeaway, they get everything rolling too soon. So kind of like the club head gets too much inside the hands, face get open, which usually causes over the top with an open face and
Okay.
kind of
All right,
a toe slice.
All right. So what you're going to do, this is a step-by-step sequence. You're going to, and again, they understand and experience wholeness. You're going to ask them to swing the way you want them to swing on the takeaway. Okay. Now you're going to say, Betty or Mary or John, okay, I'm going to show you what I want you to do. How I want you to swing. Okay? Now, how I want you to take it away. Now you're going to take it away like this. But you're going to give me a number from 1 to 10 on how much wholeness you experienced while you had your attention on this part of the swing. Oh, okay. 1 to 10. 10 level of wholeness. 1, no, my attention was so much on the part, I could not experience any level of wholeness, right? So, and this is without a ball. So they start swinging, and they could probably start off with, 4 or 5 or 3 or whatever, because their attention is so much on the part. Now, you're going to say, John, take as many swings as you want without a ball. until you have experienced a 10 level of wholeness while your attention is on the part. Because now we're going to set a baseline for what the brain physiology needs to experience in order to go in there and do surgery correctly. All right, we're on the same page, right, Landon? You understand? Okay. All right, so it may take them 3, 4, 5, 15 swings. You just patiently wait, and they'll know, right? Okay, so now we have a baseline. Now they're going to hit a ball. Now they're going to swing. But here's the secret sauce. I want you to swing, John, with your attention on changing how you're taking the club back. But you're going to give me a number from 1 to 10 on how much wholeness you experienced while your attention was on the part. And I don't care whether you made the change or you didn't make the change, because we're not using that criteria. We're not evaluating whether you made the change. We're evaluating the level of wholeness while your attention was making the change. Whether the change was made or the change was not made is inconsequential. So what you're doing is you're ensuring that the origin of change, which is the quality and the level of wholeness, is at a high level, because this is how you transform intention into execution. You are asking John to make a change in how he takes the club back. So what are the dynamics of change that allows him to do it? And unless you understand those dynamics, it's you did it, you didn't do it. You did it, you didn't do it. You did it, you didn't do it. So he doesn't understand what happened when he did it, which is a high level of wholeness. He doesn't understand the dynamics of change when he didn't do it, which is a low level of wholeness. So the deposit in the basal ganglia is very weak, and it doesn't hold up when you only have one ball.
It's going to revolutionize the way that I teach. So anybody who's around Miami, come take a lesson from me, because we're going to get all the deposits in the basal ganglia, because it's so interesting what you said about how the intention and the execution don't necessarily need to match up, because it's like, if people can have the understanding and the experience of wholeness when they go and play golf, you would be way better off with a completely whole golf swing than a completely whole golf swing that has some of the physics are a little bit off, than a unwhole golf swing that is perfectly on plan. Would you agree with that, Steven?
That 100%. It's very interesting because what holds a golf swing together is one thing, and that is timing. Timing holds a golf swing together.
Mm-hmm.
Timing is taking the sequence of events that are happening and making sure that they're firing at the right time. There's a very interesting video I saw by Padraig Harrington about how there are some players on the senior tour who have very poor swings and are very successful, and there's players on the senior tour who have really good swings who are not successful, okay? Because what happens is that if you have timing there at a high level, and let me say that timing is always a byproduct of the quality and the level of wholeness. Wholeness is the origin of timing. And you can have some mechanical issues there, but they're sort of erased by this high level of wholeness and the timing, which you never would teach someone to do that, okay? You wouldn't teach someone to swing like Lee Furyk or Raymond Floyd, or I don't know if you ever seen Miller Barber, okay, Mr. Incredible, or even Jack Nicklaus, a flying right elbow, okay. But they had timing. They had timing. They had timing. They had timing. So and as far as working with elite players, and this is what I always ask them. I probably asked you, if you search your memory bank long enough to see where you are in the food chain as far as your swing is concerned, is that if you could access your better swings on a consistent level, are you going to be a happy camper at the end of the day? And the majority of really good golfers would say yes. Well, if that's the case, why aren't you working on accessing what you already own rather than trying to reinvent the wheel? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And the, you know, you look at a guy like Rory, 10
Oh, really?
years, 40 majors, not one win, okay? With that swing, which is, I mean, it's computer generated, right? Is that
Yeah.
he's breaking wholeness. And another reason why wholeness is broken so consistently and so successfully by so many pros out there, okay, which really limit their ability to reach their potential as golfers, is that attention is equated with execution. Attention is equated with execution, meaning the more attention I put on how I take it back or how I set it or how I come down or how it's released or whatever, then I have a better chance of actually getting all the dominoes lined up and hitting a good shot. Attention does not equate to execution, because if attention equated to execution, Rory would have won 10 out of those 40 majors, because certainly he had a lot of attention and a lot of focus and a lot of and a lot of concentration. The only thing that equates to execution in delivering a successful motion is the quality of silence you experience during the motion. That's it. End of story.
That's amazing. Like attention doesn't equal execution.
No.
That and wholeness is the prerequisite of good timing. I mean, those are two just incredible nuggets there. Because I see so many people who have, especially smart people, golf tends to like invite, the CEOs, the very successful type people, because they enjoy the challenge of it. They enjoy never being able to kind of perfect it.
Yeah.
But all these people always are, the prefrontal cortex. They're the CEO. They're the people who are always trying to solve problems. And so they think that they can use their conscious mind to produce better results. And I've never seen any bit of conscious mind have a better golf swing because of it.
No, you go in the opposite direction. And then you start working on the parts like nobody's business, because that's how they became successful in whatever they're doing. But this is a different animal, okay? This is a whole different universe. And these laws of motion, there are very specific laws of motion. And if you honor these laws of motion, you will be successful. If you don't honor these laws of motion, you will be humbled in one swing. Really humbled.
Absolutely. There's nothing more humbling than thinking you got it. You're like, oh, I just hit this one good. I'm just gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna let my ego get in the way. I'm gonna have, the process is gonna be the star of the show, and I'm gonna violate all the rules of the bank, and I'm not gonna be able to access what I already own. I just shot 64 yesterday in my practice round. I'm gonna go out to the first tee, walking all swagger, thinking that I own it, thinking that I have this. But then my wholeness will get off, my timing gets off, my execution gets off, the quality of space isn't there. So really having this systematic understanding of where it is that fluid motion is generated, and having like, I don't know the right way to describe it, but I consider it kind of like reverence to what it is that we're trying to create. So it's going into, I know you have a lot of experience with transcendental meditation and kind of more of like the spiritual realm of golf. And I do think there are a lot of kind of spiritual aspects that go into to producing good golf shots, because you need to almost like surrender and just let go and allow yourself to actually access what it is that you own. Good deep breaths, good ability to, not try to take it over. So how would you say like your experience with the meditation and with spirituality has kind of shaped your golf game, or the way that you look at it, or the way that you
Well, first, I learned Transcendental Meditation, TM, in 1975. It was the single best decision that I ever made in my life, because it affected all areas of my life. And had I not learned TM, and TM allows you to experience in a very simple, natural, effortless way these deeper levels of the mind, this program never would have been developed to the extent it has been developed. Because the program really was developed, Landon, and the reason why it took so long to develop, based on my own inner experience during meditation. And over the years, I started to experience deeper and deeper levels of the mind. And everyone's mind operates the same. There's surface levels and there's deeper levels. So I started to understand how dynamism emerges from silence. And the deeper the silence, the more successful and powerful and efficient the dynamism is. So I started to own that area. And because I owned it, only because I experienced it, I didn't read it in a book. You know, you go to the restaurant, you taste the food, you don't have to look at the menu anymore. You're tasting the food, right?
Hmm.
So that is when the program really started to go to another level. And as far as spirituality, yes, what happens when you access deeper levels of the mind is the deeper levels of the mind start to guide the motion, start to be in charge of the motion. And it's sort of, what they say, the unconscious mind. I don't really like that term because when I think of unconscious, I don't think of being conscious, okay? I think of being unconscious, right? So, but what it is that you stop becoming a prisoner of boundaries. You're no longer a prisoner of boundaries. Now, you think about when you played your best golf, you personally, and when you had your best swings, there was no micromanaging. There was almost like a deeper element of intelligence was overseeing the motion. And that deeper level of intelligence, a deeper level of natural law, can only be accessed when the mind is very, very quiet and very, very silent. And the gold standard in zone quotes, I always go back to Tiger, is from his DVD Tracking the Tiger, and I'm quoting. He said, "There have been key shots in major tournaments where I took the club out of the bag and I didn't remember anything until I saw the ball in the air," which is exactly the opposite of what you think Tiger is experiencing. But what made Tiger great is that he was having a very deep spiritual experience when he was playing. And that spiritual experience was generated from where this micromanaging and this over focusing and over concentrating and all this attention is simply gone out the window, and he sort of surrendered. And in a way, it's surrendering to a higher level of intelligence. Because when you think about it, you really think you're going to manipulate something that's moving up to 110, 115 miles an hour. You out of your mind, okay? And you've got a very small hitting space. You're hitting a very small object, and it's going 300 yards. And you really think that you can micromanage that? So in a way, I always wanted to feel that when I teach, it is a spiritual technique. It is having a unique human experience of really letting go and letting a deeper intelligence of the mind body connection take over. And when you have that experience, the score becomes secondary. The actual, and what becomes primary is this feeling of freedom. I'm just free, okay? You've got trouble on the right, you've got trouble on the left, you're in the hunt, you don't have such a great lie. The club you're not in love with, the shape you have to hit, but it's not my favorite shape, but I am free. And when you have a shot like that, that's worth its weight in gold. And that's what stays with you for 10, 20, or 30 years later, just that feeling of freedom.
Oh, absolutely. No, that feeling of freedom, like a really good friend of mine and I, Petey Borja, this is all that we would talk about. And I caddied for him a couple of years, getting ready for Q Score in Q School, and all we were talking about was freedom, freedom, freedom. Don't want to guide it. That was kind of his terminology was when he didn't access freedom, he was guiding it. So like that, I think you nailed the answer on the head, like accessing the words that I wasn't able to of surrendering. It's exactly what you have to do when you walk into this shot, and you cannot surrender to the shot if you are going into it with an ego of I'm concerned, I have a fear of failure or even a fear of success, or if I'm trying to do this for somebody else. Like if you have any of those things, you aren't able to have the silence. You aren't able to have that freedom, and then you're tense and then you get upset, and then the next time you're in that situation, if you aren't able to access the freedom, then it just compounds itself. Like, oh, I always do this. Now this turns into a story. And then it starts to become more of like your identity. You can kind of identify with it. And, all of it stems from going into it with the surrendering mentality and not being able to access silence. And you can access silence by understanding that the quality of the space influences the quality of the motion, which you can then have more wholeness. When you have more wholeness, you have better timing. When you have better timing, you have better results. They kind of get that close.
That's a really good sequence. That's what they should be talking about on the Golf Channel. Okay, you have these golf lessons with whomever. Okay, no. Okay, that's important. All right, we understand that's important. But how about talking about the origin of greatness? How about talking about the origin of a well-timed swing? How about talking about how to control distance with wedges or putts, or how to really find the center of the club face? So, without doing that, understanding that, complete understanding, and it's not my understanding. It's not my program. I may be clever. I did invent how fluid motion is created. Is that this is the next evolution, not only in golf but in all sports.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm excited I'm truly grateful to have met you. Kind of one last story and then I'll get you out of here. So when I was competing professionally, I was looking for someone to help me with my mental golf game. So I was about to go fly out to Phoenix to go work with Pia and Lynn Nielsen. I was considering going and working in California with Michael Larden. There were a couple, Bob Rotella was there. I had some finances, I had some budget. I wanted to improve the mental side of my game. So I was practicing at Sarah Bay in Sarasota, Florida, where I was living, and David Ledbetter is a member there. So David was there chipping, and friendly with him. I said, "Hey, Mr. Ledbetter, very nice to see you. Do you know any of these people?" I wanted to kind of help me with my decision. So he's like, "Yes, P and Lynn, they're very good. Michael's very good. But there's someone who has really been having a lot of success at my academy." And, he had Dr. Bob Winters was there at the academy as well. So, he didn't have to send me to you, but he was, he's saying someone who has had a lot of success is Steven Yellin. And as we're having that conversation, David and I, you call David. And it was bizarre. Like just the timing of it was just bizarre. And he's like, "Hey, will you look who it is?" And so he introduces, and that's how we actually first spoke. Was such an interesting, unique situation that makes me believe that there is a little bit more than just a random happenstance. So I'm so thrilled, and that you all were so generous with your time to come here today to my podcast. Hopefully the people who were listening have a better just first understanding that golf is different than what it is. The production of fluid motion is different from what you see on Instagram. It's different from the techniques that everybody talks about. And this right here, what we're talking about, truly feels like much closer to the truth, coming from somebody who competed professionally around the world and tried a whole lot of different things. This right here, what we talked about, the reality of how it is that you are going to be able to become a better golfer, whether you're just starting out and you're an 18 handicapper, 36 handicapper, or someone who's trying to compete professionally, or someone who's trying to win major championships. So Steven, thank you so much. If people want to learn more about the fluid motion factor or learn more about you, how can they find some of the books that you've written? How can they work with you one-on-one?
My website is StevenYellin.com, and Yellin is Yellin, and Steven with a V. My book is Simplicity, which I encourage you to purchase. It's quite a different book than anything you've ever read before. And I live in Vero Beach here in Florida. There's nothing like working with someone in person. It will change your life as a golfer, and if golf is important to your life, then it'll change your life. So I would be delighted to work with you in person. You can get in touch with me via my website.
And I can't suggest it enough. Go, if you have the chance and you have the possibility, go work with Steven. I cannot give him my endorsement any more highly. He truly changed my life, and I'm looking forward to him changing the lives of the people who are listening to this. So, Steven, thank you so much. This was a real treat for me.
No, this was a lot of fun for me too, Landon. Thanks for having me on.
Of course.